States, asterisks, not Victoria. Let's get into this right now. Sit down, get your groove, because it's going to be fun. Stephen Conroy, along with Senator Amanda Stoker, is here. James Morrow from the Daily Telegraph, Joe Hildebrand is all. I look forward to no one getting a word in for the next 20 minutes or so, but let's do our best. Now, before we talk about Anastasia, and I'm sure, Stephen, you and I are going to agree about her need for an apology, please. Can we talk about, obviously, what happened today in Melbourne? But I also want to take this to about why the Victoria Police was able to get the media not to film what was going on for tactical reasons, all the rest of it here. Here, I think, is the Director of News for Channel 9.
We have to be able to see, we have to be able to show the public of what is happening. It's not what we do. We're not a police state, so it's very unprecedented and it's very uncomfortable, the decision that's been made.
So, James, what about what I said? I understand the absolute needs of things like a siege situation, an active shooter, but the idea of no live pictures in a demonstration that might be frustrating but is not endangering anyone, this was not a good day for Victoria today.
This was a horrible day for Victoria, Paul, and it was an absolute disgrace that the Victorian police decided to say that they could start to censor the media as to what they would show. Now, I think Darren Wicks there really, his Channel 9, take that for what you will. He was very strong today in standing up for free speech and for the right of broadcasters to show what is going on. This is a crucially important story right now. Now, I know a lot of people disagree with these protesters and how they're doing it, but we cannot have this situation where it becomes verboten to question the whole lockdown regime, which I think a lot of people do have a lot of problems with, even if they don't like what these protesters are doing. And we cannot crack down on free speech, free expression, the press. Otherwise, the Shrine of Remembrance just looks like Tiananmen Square.
Now, what did you think, Joe, again, about what played out here? Where, look, I think the tenor of who turned up has changed over the past couple of days, but I don't accept that it is a valid reason to not show live pictures of what is happening in a city on any one day when there is no lives in danger.
Yeah, look, I think unless there's a live threat to anyone's health or safety, there is no reason to suppress free speech or freedom of expression. I think most of the protesters are knuckle draggers and idiots, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't see what they're doing or hear what they have to say. My mate Luke, who's a builder in Melbourne, could have told Dan Andrews that forcing all building workers to get vaccinated was a pretty bad idea. Rule one of politics is to pick your battles. So why you would think that picking the biggest, toughest, angriest mob of all and saying you have to do this or else, I honestly don't know where that political antenna is heading or what it's picking up, but it's certainly not anything sensible. The issue I think here is as always, and I know I'm a boring old moderate, but it's always one of balance. And I'm a very strong supporter of vaccination. I'm very outspoken in it. The anti-vaxxers hate me for it. And I think any time you have face-to-face contact, especially in any sort of vulnerable setting in aged care and healthcare, in teaching, anytime you're having to face with the public, I think there's a very strong argument that you should have to be vaccinated, like you have to go through all sorts of other safety protocols to achieve those jobs. Anything from working with children, check, to scrubbing up if you're a doctor. But working in a construction site, as long as there's sort of COVID-safe protocols in place on those construction sites, as has happened in New South Wales when we had our pause, I don't really see why this is something you would die in a ditch over. And certainly little things like taking away your smoker or shutting down the tea rooms, again, that seems to me just that kind of mean, nasty sort of approach that Victoria seems to specialise in these days. And again, it's an inverse approach to what we've seen in New South Wales. And I don't want to kick a dog when he's down, but there seems to be this default position in Victoria where we'll ban everything as a knee-jerk initial response, and then we'll sit down and think about what freedoms we can gradually allow. Whereas in New South Wales, the position has always been, all right, well, our default position is going to be you should be able to do what you want or what you need to, but we'll look at these areas where there is a high risk and we'll suppress or ban those. And again, it seems that the response in Victoria has frankly just piss people off and cause more suffering and more heartache and more disruption and chaos in an effort to apply the very order that autocratic regimes always strive for.
Yeah, well, I mean, Stephen, the truth is that every poll that's shown us everywhere that people support mandatory vaccines, everything from 66% of mandatory vaccines to go to the shops through to different industries. But it is fairly obvious that health settings, indoor settings are a little different than everything else. But at its heart, what do you think the past couple of days have been about in Melbourne?
I was terrified there. I almost thought you were going to introduce some facts into the conversation with someone who actually is living and working in Melbourne, as opposed to the preloading conversation that was just taking place. Well, let's just start with a few simple facts. The media were not banned from showing all vision. They were
told that it was a 60-minute delay.
A particular camera angle. What they've moved to today. What they've moved to today.
That's not true. Okay.
I think after
hang on.
response, you got to speak for as long as you wanted, James. So just let me at least have a go before you interject.
I want to get the senator in too.
So they've moved to a better position, I think, by saying delay for 60 minutes. I think that's a reasonable compromise between the
and that's the point that I made.
And most importantly, and I do object to both James's and even your, Paul, characterisation. The police are getting the absolute proverbial kicked out of them by these protesters. And they do have some right in this situation.
Sure.
And the media exposing the tactics that the police are using to try and end this puts them at greater risk than they should be. But I think it's a reasonable compromise, the 60 minutes. But I watched most of the day. This going live on stream. And to my surprise, I was able to watch it all day from the Sky News cameras. All day. They weren't interrupted except for the
Stephen, firstly, Stephen,
I'll get to you, Joe, in a minute.
My support for police is absolute. I've gone on a million times, right? But I don't have to re-clarify those bona fides, right? My issue, James, was about that aerial footage being shown live. I didn't pretend that no one could see anything. But again, I want to get to the senator. So, James, really quickly, and then I want to get Amanda in.
I'm sorry, it's just Orwellian nonsense what Stephen Conroy is saying here, that, it was just 60 minutes. No, they tried to stop broadcasters broadcasting without even talking to them first. They went straight to CASA and said, no-fly zone, this is not good for us. It's not a good look for us. Yes, the police should not be copying what they're copying, but, the Age newspaper, no friend of the right, also is filing a complaint against the Victorian police for how they were treated. So let's be fair here about what's really going on.
All right, Amanda, I want to ask about compulsory vaccination, right? Because the situation in Victoria and New South Wales plays differently than it would in Queensland, WA, and all of the other places that are open. What's your position on how this system is going to play out, the protection for the worker, the protection for the boss?
We have advice already in place that's come from the Fair Work Commission, and it provides, I guess, a sliding scale. If you're in a high-risk workplace, maybe in a hospital, maybe in a COVID fever clinic, maybe in an aged care residence, any of those sorts of really high-risk environments, it is a reasonable thing for an employer to require that the staff be vaccinated in a mandatory way. And that's because it's necessary to protect the people who are using the service as well as to protect staff and to discharge the duties of the employer to keep that employee safe while they're at work. But at the other end of the scale, you've got office workers who can see just about nobody, and it's not reasonable in that environment. And so there's sort of 4 stages if you work through the advice, going from high risk down to low risk. And it means that you need to assess the level of risk that's faced in each type of workplace to determine whether or not it's going to be reasonable to impose that. But I think we need to start from the fundamental proposition that individuals should have the liberty to decide in just about every circumstance what goes into their bodies. Now, it's a sensible thing to get vaccinated. I think it's the right thing to get vaccinated. In fact, I think you're mad if you don't get the vaccination. But I do think that it should be a voluntary thing. There will be some people who've got comorbidities or complications that mean the vaccination may not suit them. and they should have a right to be able to balance that along with, relying on medical advice for their personal circumstances. And there will be some people who have deeply held conscientious beliefs, perhaps related to their religion or something like that. Those people should be understood and they should have a right to decline, knowing the risks in doing so. But we still need to move into a world where everybody opens up and gets back to normal. And that means there will come a point where those people are accepting a risk in their own hands to move into a world where everyone else is vaccinated. And so long as we do that with enough time for everybody who wants a vaccine to get one, there's no unfairness in that.
So, Stephen, do you think there's any need to change the law at the state and federal level here to either make things clearer in New South Wales and Victoria?
Absolutely. I mean, we already have legal challenges taking place in a number of states against mandatory vaccination for some of the categories that Amanda's just talked about. And nobody is suggesting that people are going to be forcibly jabbed. People will be able to make the choice that they don't want to get back.
Not if it's mandatory, they won't. Not if it's mandatory in their workplace. They'll have to get a new job.
There is. So you're not vaccinated?
No, she said she was.
I am vaccinated.
Oh, sorry,
I'm
I wasn't sure if you
AstraZeneca.
said you were.
No, they would have to get a new
I
job.
thought you said you were going to get a new job.
They would have to get a new job.
No, they would have to get a new job. Yes. And that is the choice they are making. Very simple. Their choice. They are making it. They can't be allowed
I'd suggest,
to
Stephen,
put at risk.
in some
They
workplaces
cannot
that
be
is
allowed.
fair. In some workplaces that is not. It just depends on the nature of the workplace.
They cannot be allowed to endanger other people by giving them COVID. It's very simple principle. You don't get to say, I can do whatever I want in society. I can just not care about the impact that I have on anybody else in my behaviour. If you have COVID or possibly could have COVID, you don't get to just walk around saying, I can give it to anybody I want. There has to be a situation where you are taking responsibility for yourself. And if that means you have to be excluded by your own choice, by your own decision, you are excluded.
Okay, Minister.
Take a breath, Stephen. If there's a counter argument to that, it's that it is not okay for a government to say everybody must have this, even though for a person with a particular, let's say, immune condition, it would cause them harm. Every person's case is a little bit different. They've got to go off the medical advice, and a draconian one-size-fits-all, every workplace is the same, everybody's body is the same type of approach denies the reality that we live in. Some people do not work in high-risk occupations, and if they are a person who has sensitivities because of other conditions that means a particular vaccine, or indeed all vaccines aren't working for them, then they need to have an option to be able to make that work for them. To suggest that the government should be able to override their right to balance their competing health conditions and their competing health risks is the definition of totalitarian.
All right. I want to ask here as well about today, the political back and forth, the Queensland Premier demanding an apology after she tried to scare all of the parents and kids in Queensland about being vulnerable to COVID, code for hospital and death. Again, here is her demand.
I was loudly criticised from all sections of the media. I was attacked relentlessly by the federal government. And today and yesterday we hear that Greg Hunt is now speaking with the TGA to run analysis of the trials of 5 to 11s, which Pfizer has been conducting. I just want to say to Queenslanders that I will always protect you and do what I think is right, but I will not be criticised for no reason and then for the federal government to pick up on what I've been saying. So I would like an apology from Greg Hunt.
Joe, I get the media strategy, fight with the federal government every day, and then you don't have to talk about service delivery every night at 6 p.m, but that's garbage.
Look, it is garbage. I mean, this is a state where the Chief Health Officer was only recently saying that she thought that if someone aged 18 years old received a vaccine, which is now what they're calling for all young people, got one, that they might die. And so they weren't going to recommend that. I mean, it's getting to the point of high farce. I understand it's very politically popular and good on them for pursuing it for that reason.
You're better than that, Joe. You've just run... To be fair, what you yourself would describe as an outrageous generalisation. She didn't say that.
No, I didn't know. It's no
Exactly
generalisation. I
what she
simply
said.
stated what Jeanette
exactly
Young
that is-
actually said. She said,
Sorry,
I
can I
don't
just
want,
jump in?
I don't want an
Anastasia
18-year-old dying from getting an
Anastasia
AstraZeneca vaccine. That's what the
absolutely
Chief Health
deserves
Officer
an
said.
apology.
Correct. All right,
Absolutely
James.
deserves an apology from the federal
Sorry,
government.
can I just-
Every
both of
Sydney
you guys-
media-
No, all those.
But actually-
Just to be clear, I've
every single one of you, which I think it does include you, John. It does include you.
Guys,
I don't-
you're
I don't
both
see-
are missing the big point here.
Okay,
I
James.
don't see how you can go. I don't see how you can
I'm
go
trying to
from
get you in,
saying
James.
just a few weeks ago that if a young person gets AstraZeneca, they might die, to saying we're not going to open up the state because not enough young people or no young people have been vaccinated. I mean, that is clearly an
With
absurd
each-
proposition.
You guys are both
Because they're
missing.
not
Okay,
telling
James,
them to take
James.
AstraZeneca.
Okay, James.
You
Go.
guys are both missing the big point here. Both Anastasia Palaszczuk and Greg Hunt are completely wrong on this one. There is no reason why we should be talking. Sorry, I am very pro-vaccination, but we should not be talking about giving 5 to 12-year-olds the jab when COVID is not a serious condition for young people. We know this from all sorts of people. Professor Robert Boy at the University of Sydney, all of the data from the UK. Unless a child has some serious underlying condition, we should not be talking about this whole idea of vaccinating very young children. We don't know anything about what this vaccine will act like with these kids. It just seems like madness. And for both of these people, Anastasia Palaszczuk and Greg Hunt, to be pushing this idea and that somehow reopening Queensland is predicated on this is utter madness. And it's dragging goalposts, which had said when the adult population hits these milestones, that's when we open up. Now they are just saying, oh, no, let's add this population, and let's add the little kids, and let's add the babies, and the puppies, and the kittens, and the guinea pigs. And until we get them all vaccinated, we can't open up. And this is
What have you
how
got against
we
puppies,
stay
James?
locked down
Why do you hate
forever.
puppies?
I certainly believe it should be
Why do you-
available if it is safe to anyone who wants.
Yeah, I
the
think-
concept of the
Sure.
mandating
No.
for young. But Amanda, I want to ask, should the federal government be
Yeah, can I-
apologising to the Queen?
Absolutely not. She can, bust out the violin all she likes. The facts tell the story here, and she ought to pay attention to them. The severity of COVID, by the best research available at this point in time, as it relates to young people, is this: 0.1% of young people, and I'm talking under 14 here, who get COVID-19 will find themselves in an ICU. That's a definition of a serious case. It's 7% in the adult population. Wildly different numbers. We also know, and I think you opened the program with something to this effect, that those who are in hospital, who are children at the moment, are not in there because their cases are serious. In fact, overwhelmingly, they are not serious, although we don't want any child to be sick. They're there because their parents are very sick or their carers are sick.
Correct.
And there's nobody else to look after them. So let's go by the evidence rather than by the carry-on. All Greg Hunt has done today is ask for the most up-to-date evidence. And that's exactly what you want your health minister to be doing. Anastasia Palaszczuk has been changing the goalposts left, right and centre. She's dodging and ducking and weaving every which way she can to try and maintain the ability to keep our state locked up forever. I understand why she wants to do that. It's playing well for her politically. But there comes a time when in politics we've got to do what we believe is right. And that cannot be running scare campaigns designed to terrify parents into yet another month, yet another year of living in a way that is not in the best interests of the mental health, the overall health, the well-being of the people who live in this state and every other one.
So, Stephen, why does she
I'd
deserve
simply
the
say,
apology?
Yeah, Gladys belled the cat today. In just over a week, since kids have been able to get it, 12 to 16s, 25%. 25%. Parents are so worried that 25% in just over a week have got their kids the first
I'm not
jab.
arguing about its availability.
I got my kid a jab on the first day. So I'm to everybody, get your kids, whether they're 12 to 16, which all the Doherty people said don't need to do. All of you lot have been saying don't need to do. Well, 25% of parents in a week got
Yeah,
their
but
kids
Stephen,
vaccinated.
But also, we can't
And
hide from
Anastasia,
that.
Hang on.
You should
Stephen,
stop
what did Doherty
falling,
say
Amanda,
didn't
for
have a medical effect?
the Sydney media
No,
bubble.
no.
You should stop
No.
falling.
No, hang on.
media bubble.
Can I show the
No.
graph again about deaths? No kids have died from COVID, and most of the kids in hospital in New South Wales are there for social reasons. Sorry, Minister.
Can I just say,
Stephen,
Hang on,
no,
Minister, then Joe.
Let me say one thing here, and that is to say, Stephen, you've misrepresented the Doherty modelling here. When the Doherty modelling said that vaccination wasn't necessary hey, let me finish. When it was said that vaccination wasn't necessary in that category, it wasn't to say that it didn't have a medical effect or that there would not be benefits for vaccination.
You had no vaccine.
It was
they
that
rolled
in
over
the
to you.
Hey,
What really happened?
can you let me finish?
You couldn't
mate?
vaccinate anyone.
Mate.
You stuffed up. the
Okay,
vaccine
come on,
rollout.
Stephen.
Where's your-
Come on.
So they rolled
Oh.
over for you.
Didn't your mum teach you any manners? Now,
I've seen you bellowing
The
in the Senate many times.
the modelling said that you don't need to vaccinate that group in order to achieve the desired effects population-wide at the 70 and 80% marks that were necessary for us to start living alongside the virus.
Have you read the
did
new
Doherty
modelling that they're about to produce? Have you
never
read the new
did-
modelling Doherty's updating?
Oi,
Well, hang on. No, who can read what hasn't been released?
can I just say, please, as the only qualified epidemiologist in this whole discussion, can I please get a word in? The whole point of this entire debate is that it's been completely shanghaied by people just picking ideological and political corners
agree.
and fighting them out as to how it most benefits them, or it benefits their team, or it benefits whatever, Dan says or Anna says or Gladys says. Everything about this is about a balance of risk. Absolutely everything about it. So we have data that's come out that says kids are actually safer if they get COVID and get long-term immunity from it than they might be from getting the vaccine. We have other data that says, well, maybe it's a line ball and maybe they should get vaccinated if we can have a vaccine that is far safer. It's exactly the same as the argument about whether or not construction workers should be able to go to work without 100% mandatory vaccination versus nurses or teachers. Everything is about
Correct.
a minuscule,
Correct.
tiny
Totally
little
agree, Joe.
pendulum of risk. And the idea
Totally agree.
that it should be reduced to, well, frankly, a bunch of us on late night TV duking it out is absurd. There are
prime
people,
time TV.
of course, the modelling is changing. The modelling is changing as our understanding of the risks is changing. And it's pretty rich for people to say, oh, well, we agreed with the first Doherty modelling, and that's
Everyone.
how we're
I
out
didn't.
of here.
On that
Now we
note,
don't agree with the first modelling, but now we do agree with the new Doherty modelling.
No, I
Get
didn't
yourself
agree with the
together,
first
people.
model. I didn't agree with the first model, Joe. You know that full well. We've just
All right.
this. They,
I agree with the Birmingham modelling.
they didn't even. They ignored international evidence about the transmissibility and how many
Hang on.
extra people.
If we're going
It's up to
talk
3 times.
international evidence.
Shut up, James.
Sorry.
Okay.
No,
Shut up
Stephen,
and let
sorry.
me finish for one.
Okay, but let me go
What
on.
really happened in
Because
Wuhan? That's what I
international
wanna know.
evidence is what we need to talk about here.
Okay.
If
The
we-
international evidence shows Delta is putting 3 times more people in than the Doherty study modelled on.
But people is not
That
kids.
study was
Stephen,
available
the international
to them.
Okay.
evidence
That
shows.
model
Guys,
was
I don't
available
want to
to
yell.
them
It's really
before
annoying for everyone
they
at home.
actually produced the report.
Okay,
That
it's really
model was on the table, and
Okay.
they ignored the international evidence.
All right.
So no, I haven't supported Doherty from day one.
okay. Speaking of agreement, Kevin Rudd said something stupid today. All right, relax, everyone. We're all back on the same page. He's backing the French when it comes to the submarines, not the United States, UK, and Australia.
Let me put this to you delicately. I think there have been finer moments in the history of Anglo-American and Anglo-Australian diplomacy. Leaving our French allies in the dark, frankly, was just dumb. Then surely the French, as a nuclear submarine country themselves, could have been also extended the opportunity to re-tender for what at present is a $90 billion plus project. So the French have every right to be annoyed by what has happened.
All right, put simply, I'll start with you first, James. Do you agree or disagree with Karen?
Karen Rudd, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I disagree with Kevin Rudd or Karen Rudd. I mean, this guy, and of course, we have to let's talk about this not just in terms of Kevin Rudd, but the entire left media in this country, ever since the AUKUS deal was announced, has been figuring out ways to run it down and to say, oh, no, the French are completely aggrieved and, they have so much right to be, angry about all this. Well, the fact is, the reason why the French got this contract in the first place was because they took a model, the original model, the Turnbull model, the let's save Christopher Pyne's seat model.
Yeah, correct.
Was never going to work, but they said, oh, I think we can perhaps, we can make it work. We can do this. And so that's why we went with them. And we didn't go with the Japanese. We didn't go with the Germans. And the French had in their mind that, well, it wouldn't really work. They'd build at least the first couple of boats in France, and then maybe things would move out to Australia. But the original deal as conceived, it was just two mismatched sides who needed two very different things. France wanted to build boats, and the Turnbull government wanted to save the seat of Sturt and Adelaide seats for the election. These were two completely different mismatched sorts of things. National security came a distant third in all of that. Good on the Morrison government for cutting this deal with the UK, with the US on this. This is a big win. And the sour grapes of Kevin Rudd, who has been rat-effed by the Chinese. And now he says, oh, well, no, it's the French are the problem. Come on.
Yeah, wait till he works out who owns the Wall Street Journal. He wrote an opinion piece for them the past couple of weeks as well. Now, Stephen, what do you think about this new relationship? Again, I'm not going to let the poodle and the ghost off the hook. They did a horrifically bad deal, and I love how the poodle's trying to reinvent. Oh, no, this new deal's is amazing, and I fully support that. Hang on, pal, you did the other one. But anyway, that's him. What do you think of the pivot, where it goes, and where to from here?
No, I think junking the French submarine deal was a smart thing to do. It was turning into a monumental train wreck 6 years down the track. 6 years down the track when they made a terrible decision. They still hadn't even got past the early design phase. It was just like there was nothing happening. So this was the right thing to do. There were a number of hurdles, what they call gateways, in which the government were allowed to exit. There's about a $500 million break fee on doing it. And Kevin, to his credit, came out and strongly supported that on the night. All he's pointed to today is that the government, and I think this is fair and most people will accept this, have probably underestimated how much umbrage the French have taken over this. But as always, the French are playing their games and they are, withdrawing their ambassador from the UK, from the US and Australia.
But not the UK.
But not the UK.
Yeah, correct.
Because they're in the middle of some serious negotiations about visas for the French to come and go in and out of the UK. So let's just put the French umbrage to one side.
Yeah.
We made a decision in our national interest. You couldn't tell them in advance because it would have allowed them to attempt to derail the decision. So I don't think we could keep them more informed than we did. But I think it would generally be accepted that their level of umbrage has been a lot higher than people anticipated.
Yeah.
They're very emotional people. They're passionate people. And it's also probably, I think when they said to both, when they said to both Australia and US, we are withdrawing our ambassadors, we all kind of went, okay.
Yeah.
But it's worth noting, I think, that it wasn't always a $90 billion submarine deal. It was once a $40 billion and once a $60 billion submarine deal, and it only blew out to $90 billion after it was inked. So, I think if you're looking at why Australia might have had good reason to think that maybe it wasn't the full quid, the fact that it blew out by, depending on which initial number you look at, by more than double or by 50%, God knows what the final figure would have been, probably gives you a pretty good idea of why it wasn't such a great deal in the first place.
I don't want to be accused of world of mansplaining. I am currently being deafened by people telling me to take a break. So, Amanda, you get the final say, but make it as short as possible if you really want to help a brother out.
In addition to everything everyone else has said, I think it's also fair to add in there that the French would not have been surprised to know that the Australians were not satisfied with what they were getting under the contract. And in the circumstances of having been brought on the journey of dissatisfaction, it's a very dramatic response.
Minister, former minister, future ministers, thank you one and all. I do appreciate it. All right, we've got plenty more